Hey everyone, hope you're having a great day so far. Let's talk about persuasion and specifically the art of winning over. Think of all the times you've been persuaded to believe something or not believe something, to buy something, not buy something. Persuasion is just a part of our everyday life, whether it's our business relationships, personal relationships. We're constantly persuading and being persuaded at the same time. I think back of a story when I was in preschool and I had just watched, I can't remember which Superman it was, one, two, three, four. I have no idea. But there's one of the early Christopher Reeve Superman movies where he takes a lump of coal and he grips it so tight that when he opens his fist, there is a diamond right there, big shiny diamond. And me being an impressionable preschooler, and Superman being a uh, an incredible authority figure, I believed it to be true. I was persuaded that if you took a rock like coal and crushed it hard enough, there'd be a diamond. I was convinced of it. So I remember at recess, there was some asphalt, like where basketball hoops were, and it was cracked and it was coming apart and it was rockifying, if you will. So I took like a baseball sized piece of asphalt, took it into class, I put it in my backpack, and I went home. And I went home with the intention of trying to make a diamond from it. And I started to think, how can I crush it so hard, like Superman did, and make a diamond? We had a giant brick wall on our house. And I thought, I'm going to throw this so hard that when it hits the brick wall, it's going to become a diamond. Well, this brick wall was right next to a giant sliding glass door, like one of those like really big ones. And anyway, my aim wasn't too good. The rock was kind of heavy, and I threw the rock, the asphalt, right through the glass door. And I mean, I shattered it completely, and I ran and I hid under my parents' bed, probably for a week. But the point is I was persuaded by, in this case, from a standpoint of authority, that something was true. So if you think about all the times you've been persuaded on something big, what do you believe religiously? What do you believe politically? What do you believe about life? What do you believe about existence? Somebody somewhere has probably helped persuade you in what you believe. Look on your any kind of social media app right now, and some company is trying to persuade you to buy their product. Persuasion is just everywhere. And if we think of it in terms of speeches, it becomes an important tool that we can have in our lives. So I think dissecting it down and understanding it will become important. Just telling that story, it makes me think I wish we had a little bit better of a platform ourselves where maybe you could tell a funny story of being persuaded, maybe not the wrong direction, but maybe a funny story where persuasion took place. I don't know. Well, we also have persuasion on the intellectual level. And I remember hearing this quote once, and I don't mean to downplay anybody's religion at all. I'm a practicing Catholic Christian, I believe in God. And I also believe in reason and rationality and science and all those components that go with it. So I remember hearing this quote once: God said it, I believe it, that settles it. Now, that might persuade some. Probably they've already been persuaded. If you went up to somebody and just said just this quote right there, um, probably not going to persuade them one way or another. So it's a bad form of intellectual persuasion. So we have to know the different types, the different levels, the different ways that we can persuade somebody. Here's a pretty good quote. And disclaimer too, a lot of this lecture, in fact, the vast majority comes from the work of Dr. Greta Marlowe, so I want to give credit where credit is due. And this slide, I failed to mention her as a source. But here's a great quote. People don't do what you want them to do just because you want them to do it. They act in their own self-interest, and unless you can plainly identify those self-interests and appeal to them, the public will not act as you would like them to. That's interesting because it's basically saying, as humans, we're self-centered in that we're not going to change our opinion unless it adds something to my life, unless it makes my life better in some way, my self-interest, which is kind of encoded in our DNA, right? Like we don't cross a river unless we have to. you know, um, we're looking out for number one oftentimes, and we're also very fixated, or we're very cemented in our beliefs a lot of time. So it takes a lot to convince us to go from one side to another. And I'm not talking about trivial things. I mean, that's not at all what we're talking about. We're kind of going here more on the intellectual level, or more of an important, I don't want to say life-changing, but impactful sort of understanding and beliefs that we hold strong to. We don't just, you don't one day wake up Catholic and say, well, I'm going to be Mormon just because, there's a persuasion that happens, or I'm a Democrat today, and tomorrow I feel like being a Republican, and those are large examples, obviously. But we have a way of going about changing what it is we believe and how we draw those conclusions. So when we're talking about persuasion in the form of public speaking, we have to differentiate between the individual and an audience. And the individual, sometimes, if we're giving a persuasive speech, especially if it's, pretty controversial, let's say, you're probably less likely to persuade people from their beliefs to yours if they differ. Now, it might strengthen somebody's belief in what you have to say if they're already in one accord with you as an individual, but it's going to be a little bit harder, trickier to win a room over the more controversial it gets. But you can also start thinking of it of the needs of the individual, and what this benefits, what this information you're providing, how it benefits them. But an audience, it goes without saying that it's going to be trickier to win an audience over to what it is and how it is that you're trying to convince them to believe. So that's where providing facts, things like that, become important. And one way of understanding your audience is through educated stereotypes. Whoa, wait up, Professor Foss, aren't stereotypes bad? We definitely have a bad connotation. But as Dr. Marlowe points out, a stereotype is a standardized mental picture that represents an oversimplified version of who a person or group of people are or what they are like. But not all stereotypes are negative, and they can help you to know your audience, these educated stereotypes. So Dr. Marlowe points out using the acronym DAMIC, and that stands for demographics, attitudes, motivation, interests, knowledge. And that's how you get at these educated stereotypes. So let's break it down. Demographic information, such as age, gender, nationality, economic background, or education level, can help a speaker draw some generalizations about their audience. For example, college students generally aren't going to be interested in a speech about Social Security benefits, while your grandparents probably aren't too interested in Lady Gaga. I guess it depends on who your grandparents are, but demographics can take you only so far in preparation, though. It's also important to consider the following 4 factors about your audience. So right there, we have something as we're picking our persuasive speech. finding something that's going to interest or benefit college students probably is the wheelhouse you want to go with. Next, we have attitudes. We have attitudes about things, even if we don't know much about those things. Attitude is an evaluation. Is something good or bad? Okay, pause right there and think about that. If somebody was going to get up and give a persuasive speech on abortion, you would automatically have an opinion about that, right? Your attitude would already be there. So it could, whether for or against, the shields are kind of up as far as your beliefs already are. So the attitude of going in. But say you were to talk about college student loans. Okay, well now that's something that a lot of college students are interested in hearing about what you have to say, and probably would align more with, let's say for instance you were to say, I think all college should be free. Probably a lot of college kids would agree with you right now because it is stinking expensive. Um, you know, uh, 30 years from now, their opinion might differ, but right now, where their attitude is towards college, towards student loan payments, is probably more pro free, or some more financial assistance towards college. So you can kind of gauge where you assume an attitude is going to be collectively for an audience to accept, deny, be with, be against, so on and so forth. So you can evaluate that when you're thinking about what speech it is you want to do. And that's not to say I'm all for a little bit of persuasive controversy. I wouldn't, within a certain realm, but if you feel strongly about something, by all means, do a speech on it. I'm for that. College is a place of where we can have academic discourse, where there can be, again, this isn't a debate, but where I think opinions are fair to be presented. You have certain academic freedom. Um, but yeah, attitude, very important when to consider when giving a persuasive speech. So as you're thinking of a topic, be thinking about your peers or who you're going to be presenting this to. The motivation to listen. And if you think about why the audience members are listening to this speech, is it because of some external threat or reward? That would be an extrinsic motivation. So is it something like they're listening because I said you will not get an A unless you're paying attention? Okay, that's an extrinsic type of motivation. Or is it because they are truly interested in the topic and want to hear what you have to say? So intrinsic motivation. So if you're thinking of a topic, what is going back to that the individual and that kind of self-interest, is it something that's going to benefit them? And then that's what advertising does all the time. You're motivated to go and do something because um, you'll be rewarded and your life will be better because you made this purchase, right? You yourself will be, there's a goodness that'll come from you doing it. I kind of think about all my friends on their birthday on Facebook that they'll say, instead of presents this year, I'm wanting people to donate to this cause. Well, I don't have much motivation to donate to a cause that, they want donated to. It might bring awareness of who they are, but I just as soon give that person money and they can do with it as they please. Now, that's not to say asking for donations are a bad thing. I just think that level of motivation becomes harder to see an appeal. Um, Interest, a little bit like motivation. Although it is important to try and tailor your message to an audience interest, don't let your fear that the audience won't be interested in your topic keep you from talking about it. I once heard a saying that said, there are no dull topics, only dull ways of developing them. With a little imagination, you could probably find some way some way to interest and involve the audience. So that's definitely, I mean, I think in keeping with this is you want to pique people's interest. You want them involved. You want them motivated to listen. Um, you can take a seemingly uninteresting topic and make it interesting. As you're doing this persuasive speech, maybe there's something you're involved in that you can create appeal for people. I think of video games. I don't play video games. I kind of used to, especially sports games. My brother and I, we'd have huge battles, but I'd kind of get bored. And not to date myself, but this is going back to the original Nintendos and stuff like that. It was kind of one of those things. You'd sit down at 10 a.m. and next thing you know, it's 5 p.m. and you're like, where did the day go? So we really didn't play all that much, and I found younger generations, especially as gaming consoles have gotten more and more complex and more better graphics and things like that, there's a lot more kids playing. And in the past, I remember I taught a speech class in high school, and I think a lot of the boys and one girl, and this is not to say, it's more of a boys thing. It's of course not. I know tons of girls that play video games. It just happened to work out that way. They all gave persuasive speeches on, why the benefits of playing video games and why they should choose this console over that console or something like that. So I remember I didn't have much interest because I didn't know the topic. And, a few of them kind of brought me in and like, okay, even if you're not a gamer, why you should care about this. So be thinking of that as well, especially if your topic's kind of small or, services a small audience. You need to remember to think about, and I know you don't have much time, but make it interesting for people who might not know this world that you're talking about. Knowledge of your topic. An audience that doesn't know much about your topic will need more in-depth information. Exactly kind of what I was saying. And now if you had a half hour or 20 minutes, like some of these TED Talks are, that would be easier to go into the history of or the insights behind these different things. But be sure to pepper it in. Like if it's something that's fairly common knowledge, I wouldn't. You probably want to provide that information because it can become important. Draw your audience in, open the doors, and invite them into your topic. I guess in using that analogy and not mixing metaphors here, if you were to have a party. And you invited people when you open the doors, the people go right in and feel welcome, and they kind of understand the layout of the house and, stuff like that. And if it's someone when you open the door and they don't know, they've never met you, they don't know what's going on, you want to bring them in, make them feel welcome, show them around. So the same is said for this. Make the strangers feel welcome to your topic. Consider the topics that changed your view. What did it take for you to change your mind or to grow intellectually? That's really interesting because I'm a firm believer of we change slowly with what it is that we believe, and certainly we can change over time. I just it's probably happened to a lot more people than me where there's an instantaneous. And now again, this is something kind of on a bigger level, because I think most of us, when provided with good factual information, will buy into whatever it is that you're saying. But if we again look at this in terms of motivation, that extrinsic, that external motivation, something like winning an award or getting praise. We want to go after intrinsic motivation, internal self-motivation. So kind of how we get there, right? We have different goals for persuading and getting at that self-interest level of somebody. So we have different ways we can go about persuading. Through adoption, I want to persuade my audience to try Korean food. Perfectly legitimate, persuasive speech. Continuance. I want to persuade my audience U of O is the best place to get their undergraduate degree. So we're kind of continuing with a similar thought. First one, we're adopting a new thought. Second one, we're going with a thought that's already there. Discontinuance. I want to persuade my audience to quit using Facebook. So discontinuance, discontinue. I want you to stop doing this. It's probably, I wake up every day and I'm like, why am I on Facebook? So if somebody does that speech, I'll be interested. Although I think your generation, there's a lot fewer people on Facebook. Anyway, deterrence. So stopping people from doing something. I want to persuade my audience to avoid ever getting involved in a credit scam. So we're kind of thinking those as our 4 pillars of how or what we're trying to persuade, how we're trying to persuade. So 3 types of intrinsic motivation. I should have had this slide one higher. I'm sorry about that. But anyway, intrinsic, that inside, that self-motivation, autonomy, the right or condition of self-government. So we're motivated by who we are, what we believe. I'm strong. I'm an independent person. I can believe and do on my own. Because we're kind of we're just kind of geared that way. An intrinsic motivation might be the mastery of something. So if you're going back to that example of trying to persuade somebody to try Korean food, let's say maybe somebody in your audience is a bit of a foodie. I like to think I am, but I'm not. So mastery, gaining knowledge of a skill or activity or anything like that becomes a motivation to want to listen, to give you that intrinsic motivation to listen what it is that you're having to say, and the purpose, the reason behind, or the reason for which something is done. So hearing something like quitting Facebook. Well, why should I quit Facebook? Well, you should quit Facebook because A, B, and C. Okay, for that, I will quit it for those reasons. And there's some overlap I can see behind autonomy, mastery, and purpose. But those are kind of 3, I think, good intrinsic motivations for why we as people decide to not give in, but decide to be persuaded to think a different way. Every persuasive speech is built on an informative speech, which is full of information. You may have to educate your audience before you can change their mind. This is, I know for me, we're going to be talking about these different styles, but it becomes very important, like the truth behind what you're saying, the information behind. What kind of information will your audience find convincing? And this is where you're going to have to do research to see why it's important for them to believe you. Statistics, testimony, examples, concrete proofs are what an audience wants. Look at any TED Talk and just see how much is based on concrete proof. So creating an argument. An argument is the case you present to support your claim. So those claims of try Korean food, University of Ozarks is the best school to attend, stop using Facebook, I want to help you avoid getting scammed, right? So then you present an argument and you give your audience the reasons to change what they're thinking, and you start to think of what they will find compelling. Because if it's not compelling, no one's going to do it, right? If you're advertising for, let's say you worked for the Parks and Recreation, and they told you to create an ad as to why people should come hike on a particular trail. And your argument is not the normal things that you're not arguing for anything particularly good. The dirt here is the best in the state. the bugs are not that bad. You're not saying the views are amazing, the trails are well marked. You want to use the best arguments you can think of for something. And it might even help as you're doing this to rank. You need three sources for this, and you should kind of rank them one, two, and three. What do you think the strongest ones are? Um, you know, and in the order that you would then want those to go in. Okay, so strategy appeals. We're getting Aristotelian here. Um, we're going to do an in-class assignment on this later, but this is your three appeals when you're making an argument. You're appealing to reason and logic, logos. Ethos is appeal to authority or credibility. And pathos is an appeal to emotion. So where do you lie? Like, which of these really convinces you? I think right now, if you watch commercials, I think it's so much of the pathos. It's this appeal to emotion. I remember seeing a commercial not too long ago. We didn't even know what it was for. It was like a little girl left her teddy bear somewhere, and the whole commercial was about the teddy bear getting home. And like when all was said and done, it was a commercial for like a light bulb or some random, like you could have put anything in there. It could have been like, a ballpoint pen. It could have been for like an oil rig offshore. It could have been absolutely anything. They just made this commercial for you to get teary-eyed and like, yeah, now I'll go buy that light bulb the teddy bear made at home. Some people are like that. Some people will take that ethos, that appeal to authority, credibility. That's why they have celebrities endorse products. That's why we have Jordans, right? Buy these shoes because Michael Jordan said to. That is the appeal to authority. It's why we do things, right? Jordan does it, I'll do it. That's the whole idea behind it. My wife and I the other night were talking about that with commercials, actually, and it was like, why don't they just say, buy this car because it gets good gas mileage, it gets you from A to B, and it's a comfortable ride. They don't do that anymore. There's like, anything but the appeal to reason and logic. So reason and logic, I definitely fall under that category of you want to convince me of something, you want to get me to buy something, hit me with some facts, right? Let me know. Let me know why. And if I'm anything, I'm a filmmaker. I'm an artist, so it's kind of weird that I'm not so much to the pathos, but I like some reason and logic behind my argument. So again, as you're thinking of this, a logic, emotional, and authority. These are the kind of things that you're thinking of when you're wanting to provide your arguments. Facts, statistics, expert testimony. Emotion. You can present stories, examples, lay testimony, meaning someone who's not an expert in that field. If you're doing something on scientific breakthrough, you're probably going to want to get testimony from a scientist in that field. Just saying. But there's certainly examples you can get, stories you could get. If your persuasive speech is on, donating to cancer research, well, then you can get testimony from somebody who's maybe survived cancer or a family member, something like that. And that's where that emotion can kind of come into it. And then authority, credibility, finding people that we would respect what they had to say on the situation. So on credibility, if it's you, like maybe you're doing a persuasive speech on a sport, you might talk about your credibility in that sport, how long you've played it, maybe places you've trained people, you've studied under, things of that nature. Saying that out loud reminds me of The very first time I ever taught was at a very small school in Pine Bluff, and I only played baseball a couple years of my life, and I really didn't want to coach it, but it was a small school, and the kids wanted baseball, so I decided to coach it. I was not a credible coach whatsoever, and I taught this. I knew enough to teach kids how to do this, that, or the other, and this one kid I could never get him to swing a bat correctly. And finally, one day he said, "This is the way my grandpa taught me," and he coached Torrey Hunter. I was like, "Oh, okay." So, his argument from credibility was that his grandpa coached somebody who then went on to the major leagues. Okay, but it didn't convince me. I'm like, "Well, you're still swinging a bat wrong." But anyway, you want to know their expertise, their trustworthiness, their goodwill. So here's your plans for success. When analyzing the audience, what is their attitude? What and who will they believe? And I think by this point, since you're kind of giving this in class, you can start to kind of see and know what some of those attitudes are going to be. Create an overall strategy, an approach, and find specific evidence. And leverage credibility in what you say, in how you present. So that's just keeping in mind that I think, especially for a speech like this, that if you don't seem strong and confident in what you're going to say, nobody's going to buy what you're saying. And it really doesn't matter what facts you present. I think you really have to get behind what it is that you're saying, and you have to believe your own words, and then we will be persuaded. No one's ever really been persuaded by half-heartedness. Maybe they have. I don't know. But you want to see a good response from your audience. Believe in what you're saying. So find a topic that really interests you. And don't be afraid to say something that others might not want to hear or might believe differently. Keep it in the bounds of academic responsibility, and you're fine. So I look forward to seeing what you come up with, and I look forward to seeing you in class.